Hey, honey, how was your trip to Menards?
Awesome! The Menards bag sale is back.
Oh, what's the bag sale?
You grab a bag in store and save 15% on everything you can fit in the bag. I got a new cordless drill, LED bulbs to help with the electric bill, stocked up on toothpaste, always need batteries, and paint for the mudroom, plus all my favorite snacks. Where are you going?
Menards, we're out of cleaning supplies.
Hurry in! Grab a bag in store now through January 14. Get 15% off everything you can fit in the bag. See store for complete details.
The friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
Hi, my name's Morgan from Helena, Montana, and I support this smart and funny show and get exclusive podcasts at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On, the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And this week, what's really happening at those tough love boot camps for teens? We'll get a look at the so-called troubled teen industry in the new podcast, The Lost Kids. Plus, Amazon Prime's adaptation of Homecoming is back, and its season 2 takes a sharp turn away from its source material. Join me to talk about those things and more is my real-life husband and true crime co-author, former TV journalist, and long-haired hippie, Kevin Flynn. Hello, Kevin.
What's up, baby?
Also with us is journalist, true crime author, a former defense investigator, licensed private investigator, and certified cat lady, Laura Bricker. Hello, Laura.
Hello. I think I should be certified serial killer cat lady because my cats are on a bender, along with my dog, of killing chipmunks, birds, rabbits, moles, woodchucks. It never ends. I can't take any more death.
Finally, our captain of woke cynicism, the author behind the noir novels known as the City Trilogy, the host of the hit Strange Arrivals podcast, and our Patreon book club host, Toby Ball. Hello, Toby.
Hello, Rebecca.
So, Kevin, big doings in our house this week.
Does it have to do with my haircut?
No, you mean your
which I haven't had.
Your lack of hair. I haven't had one either. Look at the grays.
I'm starting to look like Christopher Christopherson.
Chris Christopherson.
Chris Christopherson. Was that his name?
We were watching that
Close.
History Channel show last night about Ulysses S. Grant.
Yeah.
I got to go with Ulysses S. Grant for that's the look you're going for.
I'm getting there.
At least you're president of the right
I've got
side.
the man bun going.
Got a man bun?
And it's functional because then I don't have to do anything. I just put it in the man bun.
Laura, I hate to break it to you. I think that's just called
A bun.
A bun.
When you have it, it's just a bun. When I have it, it's a man bun.
Yeah. Do you understand, Laura, how that works?
Well, I do, but if you saw it, when you see this video at some point, you're going to realize why I'm describing it that way because it is just so subpar as a bun.
Toby, I have some bad news for you that I wanted to share.
Okay.
This week, I became more famous than you on the internet, and I just wanted to apologize. And
More famous than me?
Yes. And it was all
because of that moth?
Yes, that moth. Do you know how many Twitter impressions that photo of a moth has?
It's like more than 500,000.
25 million.
Wait, what?
I'm not kidding.
Only 500,000 likes?
Oh,
yeah, no, way more than 500,000 likes.
God.
Yeah, 25 million. So let me just fill people in who may not have seen this, which is like 8 people at this point. So I have this swing weekend, right? So now I'm taking off Fridays and Saturdays because things are so busy at work. And we were hanging out on our deck, and I was on a phone call with my coworker, a FaceTime call, and I saw this crazy moth on the chair across from me on my deck. And
crazy moth, like he was drooling and googly eyes?
No, it was like bright yellow and pink. It looked like an ice cream cone with like sherbet and like strawberry and yellow.
Banana and strawberry.
Lemon and like raspberry sherbet. So I turned my FaceTime phone around and showed my coworker Dan. I was like, look at this moth. And he was like, oh my God. And then I yelled into the house and I was like, Kevin, you have to come out and see this, Kevin. So Kevin, who, can't yell back because of his vocal challenges, like 5 minutes later comes out on the deck and he's like, you were yelling for me. What's the matter? What's going on? And I'm still on the FaceTime call with my friend Dan. And I'm like, look at that moth, Kevin. And Kevin, you literally threw your hands up in the air.
Oh my God.
Stormed away.
What's that for a moth?
So then, because Kevin was not impressed with the moth, I was like, I think this moth is more impressive than Kevin does, and I'm going to see if the internet thinks it is too. So I took an Instagram photo of the moth, and then I tweeted that, you can sync your Instagram and Twitter. So it went on Twitter too. And 25 million impressions later, it's been picked up by television news outlets all over the world. It's been written up in publications all over the world, including a couple of content farms.
Mm-hmm.
I'm huge in Canada, the Canadian Weather Channel, whatever it's called, and the Canadian Weather Network.
Hey.
Used my photo. Bored Panda, the Dodo, every place that makes viral content. Celebrities have liked it. The biggest one was Tyler, the Creator, which my friends and my kids were very impressed by. And
Dee Snider from Twisted Sister.
From Twisted Sister, which you would appreciate, Toby. Yep. And it's been a week.
He's a big moth fan.
Wow. Yeah. And you know what I didn't do?
Mention the podcast at all.
Because I have I understand how this is supposed to work. When you have something that goes viral, you're supposed to change your whole Twitter bio to promote all the stuff you want people to see.
Mm-hmm.
But I know better because I know the only reason people are clicking on my profile is to see moth stuff. So I didn't want to be like, hey, listen to my true crime podcast, guys. I thought that was tacky, and it's in my bio anyway. But I didn't want to be that person.
I feel like every time I click on some viral tweet, there's a tweet somewhere down there that says, well, this really blew up. While you're here, check out my Patreon account.
Yeah, I didn't do that. I just put, you all like moths, and I really love that about you. I wasn't going to do that this whole it's very obvious that it blew up, I'm just waiting for Chrissy Teigen.
Wow.
Where is she liking my moth? Just saying.
I don't know.
So that being said, you guys ready to start our review?
Let's do it.
Leading off.
Was a picture on the mountain trees, and then they have a picture of the student. They're smiling. The picture of the teachers, and the kids looks happy.
In the mountains of California, there was a program that promised to fix troubled kids using a controversial form of therapy.
Kids would come to that school because parents were absolutely desperate for some kind of help, some kind of solution, because they thought their kids were killing themselves. We were trying to save lives.
In 2004, Daniel Yuen's parents sent him to a therapeutic boarding school, which promised to help their troubled teen. But days later, the 16-year-old ran away and disappeared into the San Bernardino mountains.
A staff call that said Daniel ran away. We reported that to the police.
Daniel had walked off the campus that morning, and no one could find him.
So it's better.
Numb, completely numb. We were
paralyzed. What was do?
In The Lost Kids from UCP, journalist Josh Block explores the underregulated industry of tough love programs, and in particular, the Southern California facility known as CEDU and its historical connections to a dangerous cult.
CEDU was not a therapeutic community. It was a school where kids came to learn how to grow up.
Just imagine sitting there in a chair with people spitting on you in your face, telling you what a piece of shit you are.
We weren't miracle workers, but we certainly produced a miracle or two.
Now, all 6 episodes of The Lost Kids come out on Wednesday. We are going to be talking about some plot points from the podcast. We're not going to spoil it too much, but if you want to just skip to our thumbs up or thumbs down review, we'll give you the time code in our show notes. Now, Kevin, you know where we know journalist Josh Block from, right?
Yeah, he did Escaping Nexium.
Yes. I love him. I love his hosting style. I think his reporting is really thorough. What do you think of him as an anchor for a podcast like this?
Oh, I think he's really good. He certainly takes a story with significance and then wraps it in this true crime idea, so people think they're listening to true crime, but they're actually listening to really important investigative piece.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think what do you think about going straight right now?
Yeah. Melissa is another former resident of CEDU. It's a snow-covered day, like the one when Daniel went missing in 2004. And together, we're trying to find the site of the old CEDU campus.
It feels so weird to be trying to get to CEDU and not away.
Melissa hasn't been anywhere near this place since the 90s, when her parents sent her to CEDU. It used to be that getting to CEDU was the easy part. But CEDU Running Springs is closed now, and the new owners have gated off the property. The only way to get a glimpse of the old campus is by bushwhacking up the side of the mountain. Yeah, this way? Or
I wouldn't go down.
And so that's, it starts off with the disappearance of Daniel, And that's an important story that they will come back to by the time they get to the end.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a much more thoughtful look at this whole industry around so-called troubled teens.
Right.
And about the different boarding school type, wilderness adventure type programs that are supposed to, scare them straight and get them back to what their mom and dad want.
Well, it's an industry. I mean, that's something that the podcast points out again and again. And I think anybody who's a parent who's had a kid who's, maybe like been less successful in a situation than you wanted them to be or whatever, can 100% relate to the idea of being at your wit's end and you will do anything, just to help your kid get over something. And in the case of the Ewens, like, they want him to graduate high school. They want him to be happy. They're not saying like, we want to throw you away. They're saying like, we want to help save you. Like, Laura, don't you relate to that kind of like feeling as a parent that you really would, if you can afford it, do whatever you can to help your kid?
Oh, absolutely. And I have to tell you, I have Googled these places, and they look great online. And that's what I sort of took away listening to the way that Daniel's parents remember how it seemed like this sort of great white hope for them. And everybody felt so optimistic. And you see their websites and there's these kids, they're like, we're out in wilderness, doing like wilderness trekking with small teams and therapeutic instruction and all this. But then, holy wow, if you look up how much these places cost, like it's like $75,000 a year or more.
More, yep.
For some of these programs. So that's what's interesting is that you have to think about, you've got people that are, maybe not willing, but that find a way to shell out that amount of money. And then to have situations like this, because this has happened at other places. I mean, this isn't the only school of this type where something like this has happened. It's amazing that we haven't heard more about these kind of places and stories like Daniel's.
No, I don't disagree with you. Toby, the podcast starts and we do meet the Ewens and they talk us through how they got to a place where they decided to bring this under the school. And they even talk about, talking to him about going there and getting enough buy-in that he was willing to go check it out. And they sound so sincere and they're so believing that, something could help them. I mean, we hear that they like dipped into their 401k. But the first thing that we hear about this program is that they have this approach where they just want to tear the kid down, like make them tell the truth, get them to their basest self so that they can become the person that they're supposed to be. When you hear that, Toby, like, what do you think? Just when you hear the very basics of the philosophy of a program like that.
I'm not wildly enthusiastic about it. One of the weird things about this, and I guess these other sort of therapeutic programs, there's a wide range of them. Like I have friends who went and did NOLS, which is the National Outdoor Leadership School, which my impression is pretty legit. And they weren't like having people screaming at them and depriving them of food and making them not swat red ants off them or whatever. But the idea that, and you find this out later in the podcast, that you're basically making a curriculum or at least a philosophy of a curriculum for teenagers based on this pretty radical hard drug program that was like basically a cult that just on the face of it seems sort of wrong-headed. And they do talk about how when you're a teenager, you're still having personality formation.
Right.
Right? That it isn't developed. So you're tearing down something that's in the process of being built, just on the face of it. And I'm not a clinician or anything like that.
Well, neither were these guys, Toby.
Yeah, well, exactly. So that we're all in the same boat here. It would give me pause to think maybe I should know a little bit more before I start doing this.
Right.
It seems like there were more psychologists involved with setting up the curriculum for Sesame Street than there was for this program.
Yeah.
And I think it was very telling. We get to episode, I think it's 3, where we hear from a former counselor, staff member, faculty. We don't even really know.
Yep.
Yeah, Randall, who had no experience in education or social work.
Right.
And he kind of said something towards the end of the interview about how, well, this isn't a therapeutic setting.
Right.
And you're like, well, what is it then?
And we should say, by the way, I don't want to give the impression that like any of us think that all therapeutic programs for teenagers are this, because this is about a very specific type of program and a specific place. CEDU is the place profiled in this podcast where apparently a bunch of celebrities sent their kids, including Paris Hilton went to this place, which really surprised me to hear. And Roseanne Barr sent her kids there. He says that in the first episode of the...
Barbara Walters.
Yeah. And, there are, like Laura, I've Googled these places too. And there are very legitimate, very therapeutic programs that surround kids with support in addition to the real academic setting and help them prepare, not just for college, but just to be like healthy, community building individuals and help them through recovery or different issues that they have. And then there are still places to this day, I know of one in our neighboring state of Maine, I'm not going to name it, where they are still having kids dig holes and having them snitch on each other. And community policing in the community of kids is the philosophy of how to build character. Like, tell on your fellow student if you see them breaking the rules. And it's really something. And it does not surprise me to hear that the rules at places like this and at CEDU are, you're not going to hear from your kid for a couple weeks after they get here. You're not going to allow them to contact you. And when they contact you, they're going to tell you they hate it. And here's what you're supposed to say when they tell you that. Is it at all a surprise, Laura Bricker, that dozens of kids ran away from this particular program in California? Maybe hundreds of kids ran away.
No. When I hear about the kids running away and then I hear the description of this place, it's like something out of like a bad horror movie. It's like on this mountain and it's like out in the middle of nowhere and they're cut off from the rest of the world, basically. Like you're totally isolated. I can just envision trying to get away from this place in, the wilderness, basically, is what it sounds like. But, it struck me that not only are the kids running away, but that so many are running away, they have a PI on call to keep up with this. Like, seriously, like a whole cottage industry has sprung out of this initial school.
I mean, hundreds ran away. Doesn't mean hundreds ran away and never came back.
Right.
Seems like a lot of kids ran away and came back.
But it seems like an unknown number were never found.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like it's hard to...
More than one.
Well, yeah.
I saw 3 in something I read.
Yeah, but it seems like, and Josh certainly makes the case, that the organization seemed to be pretty laissez-faire about finding kids when they've left the facility. Now, Laura's right. You have this place up in the mountains, and you see where there's kids running away.
Like the Overlook Hotel.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's like building a daycare right next to a highway, and there's no fence in the yard. Now, it's okay for me, but for a bunch of 5-year-olds, could be a lot of problems.
No, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, Toby, when I heard at CEDU that they had these group sessions, and first of all, the fact that they call them raps is ridiculous. That's like exactly what you'd call something for teenagers, for their parents to think that they were doing something cool, right?
Right.
But then you hear what they actually are, and they're basically the whole thing is built around disclosure. Say everything quote unquote horrible that you've ever done. And it sounds like for a lot of these kids, the quote unquote horrible things that they've done are basically just like teenage activity, exploring their sexuality, staying out late. Some of the kids, were experimenting or involved with drugs and alcohol and so forth. But, it seemed like there was a spectrum. But
sounds like the worst episode of Zoom ever. Hi, Fraben, Sabi Dabis.
But here you are, you have these children basically having to disclose. When he talked about the cliffhanger about it being like tied to a cult, Toby, what was the first cult that you thought of? Did anything spring into your mind?
NXIVM.
Oh, I thought about Scientology, but yes, also NXIVM. You're absolutely right, Toby. What is it about cults? Why do they make people do that?
Why is Josh Block always talking about cults?
I didn't realize that he was the one who did the NXIVM.
Yep.
And then when you mentioned that at the beginning of the broadcast, I was like, oh, that's really funny, because I put a note about how it was sort of NXIVM-ish, in that it acts in a lot of the ways that a cult acts, but without having sort of the supernatural aspect to it. It's more the sort of mind control aspects of things, buying into a program rather than buying into, somebody as being a god or whatever. It's probably power for the people who are running it, but I think it's sort of presented and people who are in it think of it as like a bonding experience, right? Where, I'm sort of psychologically naked in front of everybody. And what other situations do you have in your life where you have like similar openness, right? So that I think it becomes...
You mean besides making a podcast?
Of course, because I do disclose all my darkest and most troubling secrets.
We all do.
Toby, I did last week. Oh my gosh.
You did. I'm still struggling with it. So I think that's, as far as building sort of group dynamics and sort of a loyalty to each other, which I think, it's a complicated psychological thing. If you're just going to be putting people on blast all the time and having them not fleeing. There's got to be a reason for them to stay, a reason for them to buy into what's going on. And I think part of it is, and you get a similar thing in team sports sometimes, depending on your coach. But the coach puts you through a lot in practice and training, with the idea being that it's a bonding thing. Like you're brought together through sort of suffering isn't quite the word, but collective toil.
Suffering. That sounds right to me.
There's also the same thing happens at boot camp or basic training in the military.
Exactly.
Where you're broken down. It's very physically and mentally abusive, but there is a curriculum to it and it builds you up for that purpose. So I'm not surprised that
it's also a choice.
Well, no, that's
to go
true,
there.
right? So I'm not surprised that some kids would go to a program like this and get something out of it. But it's not for everybody. And it's like they weren't screening.
They weren't screening for mental health issues.
Yeah.
That's for sure. I just kept thinking that, like, this is the thing about teenagers. And this is the thing that, like, we've talked about with kids in our own family. It's like, as adults, and there's a beautiful part of the podcast where he talks to an expert that addresses this. So much of teenage behavior is so confounding to adults, right?
Yeah.
But a huge part of that is, first of all, because we push back against the idea that kids become adults. And they're becoming adults when they live with us, and that's hard. Mm-hmm. So, like, there are things that kids do in the, process of growing up that, like, is icky to us. Like, just, it's like sort of like naturally icky. Like, we don't want to know about our kids, like, having sex or whatever. And the way a lot of parents deal with that is just to, like, say it can't happen, it can't happen, it can't happen, which is not healthy, but that's what a lot of parents do.
The blame is placed entirely on the child. So the parents are not at fault. This is the kid's problem. Everything that goes wrong has been caused by this kid's bad behavior. So it fits in with a very individualistic, capitalistic way of seeing things. There's another piece to it, though, where a lot of parents can't deal with the fact that their kids are growing up. And they really can't deal with the fact that their kids are becoming sexual beings and now they're getting into trouble and causing problems. And so there's a sort of anger at youth itself that kind of gets expressed in these programs.
The other thing that happens is that we sometimes, what we're calling teenage behavior is actually a symptom of depression. Like, we accept as adults that, like, all of our friends have depression and take medication and so forth. But when we see a teenager doing something annoying, like, we don't ask that question immediately. We're just like, oh, it's teenage stuff. Like, he's just being rebellious. He doesn't want to get out of bed. He's not taking showers or whatever. Those are all symptoms they can be of mental health issues. And at this place, there was no support for that, no counseling.
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the things is the parents are as much victims as the kids are.
In this
They're
instance,
being
yes.
fleeced.
Yeah.
And certainly being preyed upon, because what parent doesn't want to do something for their kid, especially if they feel like they're unable to fix a certain situation, or they can't get their kid to stop being depressed or stop running around late at night. I mean, I think it was great that episode 1 opens up with this montage from daytime talk shows where the subject is like, oh, my kid is out of control.
I do drugs. I'm very highly sexually active, man. No problem.
On a brightly lit stage sits a drug-addled or sex-addicted wayward teen and her desperate, exasperated parents.
I need respect. You need to shut your mouth.
Her hair, usually very dyed, or her face very pierced. She's labeled a wild teen.
Do you like the way your life is?
What do you think?
Yes, I like the way my life is, okay?
Laura sounds like she wants to say something. What's up, Laura?
I want to talk about that creepy smooshing thing that they were doing.
Yes.
Weird.
Every night, there were mandatory cuddling sessions known as smushing. Staff and residents were both required to participate.
I mean, by today's standard, it would all be illegal. You're not allowed to touch students at all. We were always all over each other.
What was that about? I mean, it was like listening to that part of it, like the absolute, we were talking about before, like the sort of, beat you down, mind control, sort of psychological aspect of this place. That was the most disturbing thing where they're like, and then they had to lay with their counselor, who wasn't really a counselor's head, in their lap and like pet their hair and stuff. And I'm like, Who thought that was a good idea and why? Anyone else? Totally. I was just so disturbed by that particular detail.
But that's another culty type thing.
Yep.
They're not, actually having sex, but the Manson family, he used to kind of have them do that, but in a more X-rated version. And even when we were talking about Wild Wild Country, where the townspeople see that movie with these like weird sort of kind of violent group sexual encounters. Do you remember this?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And they all kind of freak out. They're like, oh, these are the guys who are moving in next to us. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of from the cult handbook.
Yeah, but as Josh describes, like part of the thing with the kids is that there's to be no sexual relationships and no sexual tension.
Right.
Toby, you hear me? No sexual tension.
You can get in trouble for sexual tension on this podcast.
You're going to throw a bunch of 15 and 16-year-olds on the floor and have them rolling around, putting their head in each other's laps and stroking their hair, and nothing's going to pop up.
So the thing about Uncover Escaping NXIVM, which I believe we all really liked, if my memory serves me correctly, the one flaw I had with that podcast, and I don't remember if you guys shared any part of that, was like a single source podcast. It wasn't a single source, but it depended very heavily on one source. Josh Bloch's friend who had
was in the cult,
Escape NXIVM. Yeah. And of course, there were also a few other people in it too, giving some context, but it was mostly her. Here we have multiple accounts from multiple adults who experienced this place. We have the accounts of the parents, we have the accounts of the expert, and then we have 2 former employees, including one of the head honcho guys, Rudy, who was like basically the counselor, whatever, educator in charge of the place when a lot of these kids were there who are now adults. Toby, what did you think of the fact that he was able to score this incredibly thoughtful interview with Rudy? I don't think Josh pulled any punches, and I kind of think Rudy didn't either in some ways. What did you think about that part of the podcast?
Yeah, it was a great interview. I thought Rudy's attitude towards the whole thing was pretty interesting in that I think he was willing to concede that in hindsight, some, if not a lot of the stuff they were doing was probably questionable. What I thought was at least I didn't pick up on it, was that he was in any way kind of repentant about it. Or, kind of felt bad in any way. It was just kind of, oh, yeah, looking back on it, we probably shouldn't have done that. But he didn't seem too troubled by that. And he certainly was put forward as having the reputation as being, as aggressive in this tearing down aspect of things as anybody there.
I don't recall, in my own personal experience, getting to that danger point of saying, oops, I just went too far. Because to me, you never went too far. You were just trying to get to that source of the pain or the fear, whatever it might be, guilt. In retrospect, looking back, I think there were a number of kids and faculty, myself included, that left with some stuff still unresolved.
And the way he tried to kind of spin it, that kind of seemed to be one of those, the lies you tell yourself to make it easier. But the impression that you get about what actually happens is not that you're just trying to dig out some truths about somebody or about the way they feel about themselves. It's, that one woman who I think her name was Aaliyah, maybe?
Yes.
Who, she was there for 2.5 years.
Yes.
Which I just couldn't wrap my head
around.
After
being called a whore. And the whole thing was she was supposed to accept that she was a whore.
Yeah. It's sort of reinforcing this thing that the way she acted was whorish.
Yes. Laura, have you ever heard of this Synanon cult before?
Synanon is a corporation. It's a corporation whose business it is to cure dope addicts.
This is from the 1965 movie aptly titled Synanon. It's based on the real-life story of Charles E. Dieterich, a brash figure known for his no-bullshit, unconventional approach to drug addiction.
140 people who couldn't live without dope are living here, and they're living here without any crutches. We drink coffee and we smoke cigarettes. We drink a hell of a lot of coffee and we smoke a hell of a lot of cigarettes. But we don't shoot dope.
I hadn't heard of that cult. I did look it up because I was curious about it. And it was interesting, that there was this background to this school where people that, came from that cult, which was like a pretty hardcore, sounds like drug and alcohol, tough love kind of place, then started this school. And so I was like, as soon as I heard that, I'm like, oh my gosh, all I can think of is Toby. And like, there's always a cult angle. But that was really interesting, like the history portion of this, where we actually went back to, what was it, like the 60s when this was sort of, and they were talking about like the people that hanging around this place, sort of legitimizing it, and then how that sort of, grew to this offshoot with this school for, therapeutic community for the teens. And then if you look this place up, the Sidhu School, I mean, they had a lot of schools in different places. And all of them, again, were in these like super remote locations, which again makes me think of a cult, like being out, okay, you're way out here. You can't get away.
Your parents can't come see you.
That's right.
It's like that story, I think I've told this before about my cousin Dwight and his friend, his roommate from college, and how they got taken in by the Moonies when they were like backpacking around their summer off from college. And Dwight was like, he was like an Eagle Scout, and he's like, I think something's funny here. But the Moonies, first of all, they were like making them harvest zucchini for like days. He said he was off zucchini for like 10 years after that. But they partner you up with like some attractive person who's like your handler. And so his friend Steve didn't want to leave because he had this like very attractive girl. And then they like took his clothes to do his laundry. And Steve's like, I can't leave. They have my clothes.
If you want to hear more of this story, you have to subscribe to Patreon. And listen to Laura's Leave It to Bricker podcast because she goes into this.
That's true. She does, about her cousin Dwight and Moonies.
Yeah. But I want to talk about that private eye guy. Can we talk about him?
Why would this person with an Asian accent, not strong, not overbearing, have specifics that we didn't put out?
We do meet the private detective who was put in charge of trying to find Daniel for his poor parents. And he has a lot of different stories about, what may have happened to him. He says he talked to people who, without getting too much into spoiler area, think different things may have happened to him. He may be alive. He may not be alive. Who knows? But he is also so full of it. Is he not? It's always bad when you're trying to get someone on the phone and they just keep telling you they can't talk to you because they're dying. And then they keep telling you that over and over again. They're like, for how long could you possibly be dying?
And then your stepbrother
writes
sends an email
from the same email address.
Yeah.
So, Laura, you think that private eye, as a private eye yourself, what do you think of him? Do you think he was maybe a little bit shady?
It was hard because you want to assume the best intentions when you hear somebody say that this is the case that haunted them. This is like the one that got away, the one that's always been on their mind. But then the way that it lined up so perfectly that he's dying, it's like a bucket list. And then mysteriously, just because he comes back in all these years later in 2019, so it was like 2004 when Daniel disappeared, and there was no information all those years. And then suddenly, 2019, he gets this phone call that the guy, Daniel, is still in the area. And then, oh my God, amazing. He goes down to the pier and somebody has just seen him there. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Well, you heard someone was going to do a podcast about him.
Yeah, I just kept thinking, Toby, didn't you just keep thinking like, if theoretically you are a shady PI with a cottage industry in looking for runaway kids on behalf of this very sketchy school, would you not, perhaps, if you were shady, give the parents more hope than perhaps there was a reason to have so that they would keep paying you to do this investigation?
Oh, yeah, 100%. It reminded me, Maddie McCann, like there was a private eye who was in that, who did sort of a similar thing, which is kind of just keep enough hope there to keep milking the money out without actually, making any real headway on the case or even expecting to make any real headway. You just keep giving kind of, vague reports to keep the money flowing.
I got a lead. It's going to be 10 grand for you to find out what it is. All right. Well, I think we should do what we do. Let's let folks know, should they check out the new true crime mystery/reported journalism podcast, The Lost Kids from UPC. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Laura Brigger, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
This is a big thumbs up. This was a super interesting story. And so the way that it was framed narratively with like the introduction, focusing on Daniel's story, and then the background into the industry and like cult background. And then there's some wrap up with current events, but it was just really well told. And we had a lot of interesting people to listen to. And it reminded me, we had a place like this in the town I grew up in, a reform school where Michael Skakel went for a period of time.
Scandal.
Yeah. I've kind of been fascinated by that generation. Of course, that was in the 80s, but that sort of reform school, therapeutic school industry is kind of interesting. And this was really shedding light on an angle that we haven't heard a lot about. So I would say thumbs up.
Toby Ball, what about you? Thumbs up or thumbs down for The Lost Kids?
Yeah, I give it a big thumbs up as well. I think it's well reported. I think, it gets into some interesting ideas about how do you deal, or I guess I should say, how do you not deal with troubled kids? The history, the stuff about Synanon was really good. There's some sort of intense and affecting interviews. Overall, I thought it was very, very good.
What about you, Kevin Flynn? Thumbs up or thumbs down for The Lost Kids?
I thought this was an amazing story. I'm a thumbs up. Josh Block just keeps coming up with some powerful podcast series. So all sort of on the same theme there. You've got NXIVM, which is a cult, and this, which you can say is definitely kind of a cult. It could have been a goofy sleuth case where we look at the missing person, Daniel Ewan. Instead, that's a starting point to look at a bigger issue, and he never takes his eye off the ball, what the real story is. And it's about this under-regulated industry that takes advantage not only of parents writing checks, but kids who need some legitimate help or could at least benefit from a legitimate curriculum to handle their issues. So for me, it's a thumbs up.
Thumbs up for me, too. I'll tell you one thing we didn't talk about a lot. This podcast is beautifully produced. The quality of even the microphones is outstanding. The mixing is excellent. And in terms of the writing, the reporting is very straight. They get all the people that they should have to tell this story. And it's a complicated story that is obviously centered around one family and one missing kid. One of the things I really loved about the podcast, Kevin, you mentioned that it could have gone off in some dopey, true crime direction. They did do a lot of the things that a true crime podcast is supposed to do. They visited the scene of the crime. They went on a little bit of a road trip to sort of go to the place this was. They followed a young woman who had run away to sort of see her journey. And it was all perfect. It was done with purpose, and it was perfect. It was not a situation where it was okay, here we go, because this is what true crime podcasts are supposed to do. No, we actually learned something from that journey, and we learned something every time we took a turn. So I just think The Lost Kids was great. It was interesting, beautifully reported, and yes, dare I say, an entertaining listen. So for me, huge thumbs up. So, Kevin, before we continue the show, let's do a little bit of business, shall we?
Yeah.
What is going on our Patreon right now for people who go to patreon.com and support us there at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia?
Well, they'll get to listen to the Crime Writers on After Show.
What are we talking about on the After Show today?
We haven't talked about it yet.
Yes, we have.
Have we?
We're going to be talking about the very weird, disappointing ending to the show Run.
That we reviewed and we were all thumbs uppy on.
No, not Toby.
Most of us.
We're going to owe Toby an apology.
Apparently.
So that's what we're talking about on the After Show. You can get that right now. What else can you get on our Patreon?
We've got coming up a new edition of Leave It to Bricker.
Yes.
And
Laura's mystery podcast.
Their mystery podcast, and she's got a good cinematic mystery for us.
Nice.
And Married with Podcast is going to be out too.
We have a new Married podcast coming out that's going to be amazing, chock full of amazing advice.
Yes.
And heart.
Yes.
Well, I'm really excited. You can get all that stuff and more at Patreon. Now, Kevin, do we have any Patreon patron saints this week?
Yes. Our Patreon patron saints are Amanda Wilson and Aiden Harvey. Bless you.
Toby, do you want to give a shout out to the Patreon patron saints?
Yes. Hey, man. Thanks.
And also with you.
Oh, God.
Right on.
All right.
Toby, the king of ad-libbing.
Was there kind of ecclesiastical thing I was supposed to do there?
Nope, you did it. You did it in your own Toby Ball way.
Oh, okay, thanks.
All right, let's move on, shall we?
Everything all right, miss?
What's your name?
I don't know.
What is your address?
I don't know.
How about your birthday?
I don't know.
A woman wakes up in a canoe in the middle of a lake with no memory of where she is or how she got there.
I knew something was wrong with me, but I couldn't explain it to anyone. It was like the people around me were keeping a secret. Like we were in a movie. And everyone knew we were in a movie except for me. If I did something wrong, I have no idea what it is.
The trail leads her to the Geist Corporation, the mysterious company behind the mind-erasing experiments on veterans in the defunct Homecoming program.
How did we get here?
What we did
No good can come of that.
But what if we let the crazy world in? If you keep picking at this, it's gonna start bleeding.
Prime is out with its second season of Homecoming. While the first tracked closely with the popular Gimlet podcast, the follow-up goes in a totally different direction. Gone is Heidi and her search for Walter Cruz. Instead, mostly new characters deal with the effects of Geist's new product. Now, we are going to be talking about plot points for season 2 of Homecoming. The whole series is available to stream now. So to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes to hear our thumbs up or thumbs down review. Kevin, very bold choice to not do season 2 of the podcast.
Not really.
Homecoming. Why? Because they couldn't get Julia Roberts again?
Well, no. I thought season 2 of the podcast was a big disappointment. I felt like that didn't really go anywhere. We had Heidi return in season 2 looking for Walter Cruz and not being able to find him. And it just didn't seem like anything really happened and that the story was really advanced at all. So this was a good decision to sort of go in a new direction. Julia Roberts, I mean, I think if she wanted to do it, she would have done it. But what more is there for Heidi in the TV version to do? At the end of season 1, she found Walter and was kind of good with where he was. So is this still Walter's story to kind of get through?
Yeah. Now, Laura, the one thing we don't have in this version of Homecoming season 2, we don't have a huge mystery other than what happened to Jackie/Alex, which, by the way, that's barely a mystery at all. Like, I figured that out within 2 seconds. But really, it's really just sort of an unpeeling rather than a big, deep mystery. Did that work for you?
It did, because I found, even in thinking back to season 1 of the original podcast, I remember feeling sort of frustrated because, that one was told through the phone calls and we didn't have the whole story. And it was like you kind of could figure out maybe where the mystery was going. And, and so I felt, more frustrated with the storyline in that, where it was more unresolved sort of threads. And in this, I felt like everything really tied up pretty neatly the way that they told the story. So yeah, you have the mystery in the first episode. And initially, you're thinking, oh, she's another one of the soldiers. And then pretty soon, that's not the case. But the way that they use this flashback between the past and the present to sort of show how everybody ended up where they did leading up to that moment in the first episode, it was pretty effective in filling in the mystery that was there, which again wasn't a big mystery, but also keeping the pace of the story moving along. So it worked better for me now because I definitely had a lot of WTF moments in the first season, what's happening?
Now, Toby, the storytelling structure of this is really interesting, unusual, and I think very hard to do well. The first episode basically tells a whole encapsulated story. You have Jackie/Alex, we don't know if she's Alex until the end of the episode, waking up in the canoe. You see her go through the process of trying to figure things out. She goes to the hospital, then she makes her way to Geist. At the end, she, reunites with Audrey, who we don't know they're supposed to be reuniting, and it's revealed. And it's sort of we kind of along the way meet the head of Geist, Mr. Geist, and it's sort of a whole encapsulated story. And then the next 6 episodes flip it around and show us the backstory to the thing we just watched. And it includes a ton of head fakes, including one is when we first meet Geist, I think we're sort of led to believe he's this nefarious, evil character. When we first meet Jackie/Alex, we're sort of led to believe she's sort of more of a victim without more agency. Audrey, we kind of thought was this supervillain, cold as ice. All these head fakes, and so we sort of see the other side of that. I thought it was really, really well done. I liked this so much. What did you think of the way they laid out the story? Did it work for you, Toby?
Oh, yeah, it 100% did. I think they did a whole bunch of different things, and I think they did them all well. A couple of things that really kind of struck me is one is they did a really good job of kind of foreshadowing, giving you clues about things that were going to happen, and then you get to a point where you see, this is when there's going to be the fight with Walter Cruz at the bar. I wonder how that's going to go. Right. What's that all about? And because you know that that's the way it's going to end, there's this inherent tension in that scene. And I would say even more so is the scene where they go fishing. And it must be a 12 or 15 minute basically scene of them driving and talking and then walking and talking.
being over there? Deployment.
It had its pluses and minuses.
Oh, yeah, like what?
What do you mean?
Give me an example.
Okay. Like a minus would be the sand. The sand got up in everywhere.
Right. No, I remember that much.
No, I don't think you do if you're plumbing.
That's funny.
And I thought the whole thing was really intense and really well written and well acted. And then the other thing of the many things it does well, I thought it's not even really character arcs, but it's the impression you get of characters at the beginning and how without them really changing, your perception of who they are changes.
Right. Like we see a lot of scenes twice. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, but it's even like with Audrey. Like she starts off, she seems sort of smart but timid a little bit, and she has to be kind of like, talked up and gets going and stuff. And then by the end, you just realize that in fact, she's like this very driven, take no prisoners type businesswoman who just happened to be stuck at this desk job for a while.
Toby, can I just take issue with the one thing though about that?
What?
I actually think it's a double head fake with her.
Okay.
Because we are left at the end of season 1 to think she's been in control all along. We see that initial scene where she totally like fires Colin and she's very scary. At the beginning of this season, that gets torn down. That first impression we have her with a head fake where it's her partner, Alex, who's told her, this is what you're going to do. And you're going to follow the script. And she's like, I don't think it's going to work. Like, I can't do that. And she's like, yes, you can. You just go in there and fake it and you just do it. And then it works. And then it turns out all along she's been this. So it's like a double head fake. Because for a couple episodes in this season, we think Audrey is basically just doing what Alex wants. And she's not the one who like is going for the brass ring, but it's Alex making her do it, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then at the end, particularly the last episode, it's like very clear. She's like, we have won.
Right.
Like, this is what we were after. I accomplished it. Why do you have amnesia and are not happy?
Right.
He was a threat. You were taking control of the situation because that's what you do. We had a choice between what he wanted and what we wanted, between winning and losing, and we chose us.
Us?
Yes. We take care of each other because no one else will. You, me, our family, everything else, everyone else. They're just people.
Kevin, what did you think? I mean, it is hard. I said this to you, we were watching it. Whenever there's a kind of story where like you know what's going to happen and they make you watch it again, I find that sometimes incredibly boring and difficult. And somehow this was the opposite of boring and difficult.
Well, I don't think it made you watch it again.
No, but you knew what was going to happen.
Right.
And
that's
watching,
not unusual in storytelling.
Yeah, but watching something, but it was done so specifically. It's really hard to explain. I think it's because in episode 1...
What got repeated?
They told you... Well, we saw the scene with Audrey and Geist twice where he was in the office and she was to visit him.
Why do you want to speak at the lunch? Leonard, did you hear me?
I'm watching Airwolf. It gets me fired up.
There were a few moments like that, but
like that,
also in the first episode, they told us everything that was going to happen. As Toby mentioned, they said, last time you were in this bar, you were sitting with a guy. Yeah. You drank 3 beers and 3
Well, that's
shots
not being repetitive. That's setting you up so that you know what's coming.
But they told us all the details of what was coming.
Yeah.
And I found myself thinking, like, this could be really boring, and it is not.
No, I agree with you. I did not find that boring at all. I thought that was good storytelling to set it up like that. Just to jump back to Audrey for a second. We knew, like, in season 1 of the TV show, we see Audrey as this receptionist, and then for some reason, right, she's in that meeting with Colin,
firing him.
But we knew in the podcast that Audrey, that character, was a some power broker, somebody powerful, and so when we first see her in the TV show as a receptionist, I'm like, oh, well, what was that rewrite about? So they get her there, but in a different way. They never tie it up in season 1.
Right.
And that's fine. You don't have to tie up all the little loose threads in order for it to be satisfying narratively. But to come back and to sort of like, tie that thread in a way that advances the story was really good.
I want to talk a little bit about the performances in this season, which I thought were phenomenal. Lara Bricker, scale of 1 to 10, how delighted were you to see Joan Cusack appear in this season as like a career military officer badass.
Do you know what you are? You're stubborn. You just only see things your way.
Well, I don't think there's more than one way to see this.
Of course there's a million ways. You put things in context, you take them out of context. That's how new ideas happen. It takes nerve.
Everything you want that's usually played by some grizzled old Jack Nicholson type man, Joan Cusack was doing. What did you think of that performance?
9.8. I was that excited. I love Joan Cusack. I also love her brother. He was like one of my teen heartthrobs. But no, I thought she was great because she has just such great delivery and she's so funny. And even like, I hate to say this sounds so awful and morbid, but even when she's like losing her memory in the field and she's about to tip over, it was just still so entertaining.
Yeah, she's phenomenal.
I'm supposed to go to my daughter's wedding. And then he's like, you're going to get a sunburn. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so perfect.
She's like, give me a damn hat.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. And I loved also Leonard Geist, who was from the Lonesome Dove. He was July Johnson.
Oh, Jesus, Laurie.
You see the gate back there? You didn't drive your truck through it, so I guess you saw it.
You cannot refer to him as Lonesome Dove Guy. He's been in so many other good things. I believe he's been nominated for Academy Awards.
I know.
Chris Cooper, he was the dad in October Sky.
Yeah.
He's like in so many good things. And Laura, of course.
They're talking about the guy from the bar with the oxygen mask, with the tube.
No.
Hank, no?
Toby, what did you think of the performances? I in your notes see that you are not 100% as enamored with Janelle Monáe as I am. I could watch her make eggs, wrap gifts. I'd watch her tie shoes. I think she's completely captivating and so beautiful that even if she was not a decent actress, like I just love looking at her. But what did you think of the performances in the show?
How come you can say that and I can't?
You can.
Okay.
I mean,
she's just so beautiful. I could just look at her.
She has presence. It's not just her. It's not just the way she looks. It's the way. It's what she does with how she looks.
Exactly.
You know, and I mean, she just has a lot of presence. But Toby, what did you think of the performances in the show?
Yeah, I mean, I think they were all good. For whatever reason, like that kind of character where you're sort of confused all the time.
Can you relate?
Yeah, maybe it hits too close to home.
But what did you think about her? What did you think about her scene with Walter? Because there was a lot there.
She did a good job. I felt like the guy who played Walter, Stephen James and Hong Chow were both really, really good. I thought Janelle Monáe was also good. I mean, she was given a lot to do, quite honestly. And I don't know, for whatever reason, like these like sort of somewhat flat affect characters, I don't know if that's like really good acting or just sort of being blank. But to be fair, she basically acts two parts because she also acts the part of the
pre-amnesia, right?
What are you thinking?
Colin.
What about him?
He's a tool.
Yeah, he's a jerk, but what does that have to do with him?
No. He's a tool, and we can use him. This is an opportunity.
Kevin, I'd like you to respond to one of Toby's notes for me. You ready?
Yeah.
He wrote me this note. This season's quirkiness worked for me in a way last season didn't. I wonder if they saw Watchmen. Well, we know at least one person did, right?
Yeah, Audrey played Lady, what's her name?
Yeah, she was in Watchmen, so she definitely saw it when she was in the show.
And she did great in that role too.
I know.
Yeah.
What do you think about, I think they were much more restrained this season in their use of sort of the artsy Hitchcockian cinematography. I mean, we talked about this last year. The people who make the show made the conscious choice to use music from Alfred Hitchcock and other period films and also use shooting techniques from mid-century films. Like we saw a couple of shots, like the picture of a mountain was actually a photograph or a model. You see a lot of trick
the
shots
camera's
and mirrors.
locked down.
Yeah. What do you think of that use here?
Well, the director, I don't know if he's the director or the executive producer, but one of the smart people, creative people behind this is Sam Esmail from
Mr. Robot.
Mr. Robot.
He was the showrunner the first season, yeah.
Yeah, and so he certainly likes to do his film school camera technique. Let's do all that stuff. Dutch angles. And,
yeah, I don't think he directed these episodes, though.
No, but you did see more of those. Certainly, I was thinking of the scene where Walter's distracted driving his truck, And yeah, it was very Hitchcockian.
You only see him in the mirror?
In his mirror, but also you can see the car coming towards him that he can't, which is a very Hitchcockian note. So I thought visually it was very good, always very creative. I did feel like it missed sort of that big feeling that the borrowed orchestral scores from big films that it brought to season 1.
So let's just talk a little bit about the ending of season 2 of Homecoming, because it really did have an ending. It didn't leave us thinking like, where's Heidi? Where's whatever? I mean, maybe we get the hint that Walter's now going to hunt down these other guys and try to help them or something. He's got that book of names or whatever at the end. Well, Laura, what do you think of the end? I mean, he gets his revenge by making all these fancy people at this party with all those balloons wiping their brains. What'd you think of that?
I kind of loved it. When I realized at that moment and I saw him, I was like, oh boy. Because that was the one where you don't have the flashback to see the full conversation that he had the night before with Leonard, like you did with a lot of the other things in the season where they'd go back and you'd be like, oh, that's how that came about. But you realize what happened. But then, I did feel like there was sort of a finality to this season, because, I mean, this whole sort of podcast and the whole story for me, back in season 1 of the podcast has been like holding Geist accountable for what they had done. And now they've done it because they're all wiped out. So I think, a season 3 where Walter goes around with that list of names now and tries to like help the people, even though he can't remember his own history. I don't know. I guess it doesn't, maybe it will work, but I just feel like if they ended it now, it would still be kind of a perfect ending, because you can kind of just surmise that that's what he's going to go do. He's going to go off and he's going to find the people. And we don't need to see that because we've seen all these Geist people and the, Department of Defense people just fall over after they drank the, secret bathtub punch or whatever it was.
The very obviously bright red punch, which they put in the Moscow Mule cups to hide it. Toby Ball, what did you think of the ending of the season?
Yeah, so were they not dying?
I thought it was pretty explicit that they were going to...
Did you think he poisoned everybody?
I thought they were going to all pass out and they were all going to wake up later and not remember anything about who they are.
Wait, Toby, what did you think the ending was?
Oh, I thought maybe they were all dead.
Jim Jones.
Like, hearing you explain it, it makes sense, but I didn't pick up on any. I didn't pick up on any cue that anybody was going to suddenly pop up and be ready to go.
Well, we saw it happen with Janelle Monáe's character at the beginning. She was knocked out and then she woke up with a memory. And Toby, are you colorblind? I'm just going to ask you this question. I don't mean this in like a pejorative way.
Yeah.
Are you by any chance colorblind?
No. Why?
Because the stuff they drank, I mean, the cue was that it was bright red, and the memory wiping stuff was bright red. The berries were bright red. The roller was bright red.
Yeah, but it's a very.
I can't imagine you could be at a party with like 200 something people, and everybody's going to drink the first drink at the same time.
Right. It was toast.
And that there's nobody in the crowd who's like...
On the program?
In the program. Like, no. I will not be drinking with everybody. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out season 2 of Homecoming on Prime? Laura Bricker, I'm going to start with you. Thumbs up or thumbs down for this season 2 of a thing that we just thought was okay in season 1?
I say thumbs up. And you know what? Even if you haven't watched season 1, you can watch season 2. It'll take you a while to figure it out, but it was fun. I watched the whole thing. Like, once I started watching, I didn't want to stop, and I just binged the whole thing in like an afternoon. So I would go with thumbs up.
Toby Ball, what about you? Thumbs up or thumbs down for season 2 of Homecoming on Prime?
I was not excited about watching this in the slightest because I didn't like Homecoming season 1, but I really liked it. It's hard to believe it's the same franchise in my mind, although it's got, it's got sort of a similar sort of visual feel, I guess, and there's some of the same quirkiness, but I just felt like the writing was so much stronger. And it might have been that they got to move away from the podcast source material a little bit and, exert a little creativity of their own. So an enthusiastic thumbs up.
What about you, Kevin?
I am also a thumbs up. I am glad that season 2, the TV show, did a better job of answering what happened to Walter Cruz than the podcast did. In fact, I'm not very anxious about listening to season 3 of the Homecoming podcast, if it ever is made. But I would be interested in watching season 3 of the Prime version. It didn't have Julia Roberts, didn't have our good friend there, the Inspector General, running around, but Stephen James, gave another great performance here, and also Janelle Monáe. Some great performances all around, and Yeah, thumbs up for me.
Yeah, I loved season 2 of Homecoming on Prime. I think if you haven't watched season 1, I do think you could just watch season 2 as a standalone. There's plenty of context clues. You'll figure it out. I don't know if the writing team who wrote the season is the same writing team who wrote the podcast, although their names are on it. I'll just say, like, my fantasy is that this was their take 2 of what season 2 of the podcast could have been.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys remember, like, we really liked season 1 of the podcast. We thought it was really well written. And then as a TV show, it just fell flat because I felt like it was doing an imitation of something that was better as a podcast.
Yeah.
And also some of the cast, I think that Julia Roberts casting was a mistake. I'll be honest. I think that she doesn't quite have the same like harried vulnerability that Catherine Keener did with her vocal performance in the podcast. And she also was a little too old, which I hate saying, except that just seeing her sort of with the romantic possibilities with this 20-something actor, we're just a little off. But season 2, basically, like all of those elements that were weird and bad have just been removed from the equation, and everything that's good, the sort of intrigue of a memory erasing drug, all this stuff is in. It was, I thought, super good. I loved it. So I'm going to give it a big thumbs up for season 2 of Homecoming on Prime. And now it's time for my favorite part of the podcast, a little something I like to call the crime of the week. The Associated Press is reporting that the number of those annoying robocalls is down because of the pandemic. Monitoring organizations say calls asking for credit cards or your social security number are down 40% over the last 2 months. Most of the robocalls are generated from operation centers in India and the Philippines, and fewer scammers are able to make it into work. We shed no tears for unemployed con artists, but what about the poor bots who will no longer get to use their knowledge of area codes, synthetic voice generation, and automobile extended warranties? Remember, bots aren't born bad. They're just programmed that way. So panel, here's my question for you. Now that the labor market is getting a little bit tight, what will these robots do for work? Laura Bricker, I'm going to start with you.
Well, they usually call during dinner time. I would propose they shift their model to call in the morning to wake up all the lovely teenagers that don't want to get up for remote school.
Good idea.
A wake-up call.
Yeah, wake-up call. Because this week what I started doing, I started hiding an alarm clock in my son's room in like different locations to go off with that annoying like, but I think a robocall would have done the same trick, and then I wouldn't have been on the receiving end of his ire.
Profane outburst.
Toby Ball, what do you think these poor robocall robots are doing for work these days?
I think they're on Twitter trying to sway our election.
It's probably true. Sad but true. Kevin, what do you think?
I think those bots can go back to giving 5-star podcast reviews.
That's true. To us, please.
No.
Please, to us. Feel free to give them to us if you're out there, bots. We're not going to pay for you. We'd like them for free, please.
Yes, thank you.
But seriously, listeners, please, if you like the show, give us a review on Apple Podcasts. It really does help. All right, that probably does it for the night. But Laura Bricker, before we go, do we have a cat of the week this week?
We do have a cat of the week this week from Maddie Cowdy. And it is her cat, Cecile, the calico cat, who celebrated 19 years in cat years. They had a little birthday cake for Cecile. So that's like 92 years old in human years, Maddie writes. And the reason I like this cat is because it wouldn't hurt a fly, literally. And my cats are just like killing everything. So I was like, there's a cat out there that is kind. She gets along just fine with her one remaining cat, Fang. She is the gentlest soul in the world, and we feel lucky to be graced with her presence every day. Maddie says she's been listening to our show for years. She first heard of it from listening to Undisclosed Addendum, on which Robbie would recommend Crime Writers on. You have been my constant companions ever since. I love each of you for your personalities for different reasons and have laughed and cried with you over the years. Thank you for continuing to create great content for your listeners. So
I love her.
Yeah.
I love her. I love you too. You make me laugh and cry too. You really do.
Well, that's good.
All right, Laura Bricker, people want to reach out to you and send you more glowing reviews of our podcast. How can they find you on Twitter to send you their cats of the week, even if it's a different kind of animal?
At Laura Bricker.
And Toby Ball, folks want to reach out to you and say, hey, Toby, I believe in UFOs. How come you don't? How can they find you on Twitter?
At Toby Ball NH.
And Kevin Flynn, if folks want to reach out to you and send you their artfully made side-by-sides of you And Ulysses S. Grant, how can they find you on Twitter?
I'm at Kevin P. Flynn.
And if you want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you can find me at Reb Lavoie. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Crime Writers On. And please join our amazing community in our official Crime Writers On Facebook discussion group. Support the show at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia. You'll get all our extra podcasts, including the After Show. Our theme song was performed by the New York Ska Jazz Ensemble and used with their permission. Our line editor is the incredibly handsome Henry Lavoie. Our social media and newsletter maven on maternity leave is fellow Taco Bell stan Meredith Plunkett. This show was recorded in the Yoga Loft above the Bodega in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi studio, otherwise known as Studio C, the closet in our basement where we also yell at each other about our deepest secrets. On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you
later.
Toby, I hear some serious construction going on by your house. It's very exciting. It's adding a lot to this podcast right now.
I know what's happening. Usually it's my house. What is that?
Yeah.
No, they're seriously they're doing a bridge. They're repairing a bridge that's like 300 yards from our house. So we didn't record, but last week they were doing night paving for 2 nights, and there was literally like a parade of rollers, like up my street, like idling on our street.
Don't worry about it, Toby. Laura has the incessant screen door behind her, and you have
7 or 8 dump trucks.
Partners in Crime Media.
Save big money on Clearview Cabinetry. Clearview Cabinetry starts as a kitchen built for now and grows with you as life changes. It's flexible by design with full access cabinet construction, so you can go from doors to drawers for storage that works when you need it. Explore Clearview's cabinet options in store and on Menards.com and save big money today. Big buys, big savings. Check out more of our great deals going on now at Menards.
Save big.